Well, welcome, guys. This is the Second Opinion Sports Medicine podcast. I'm Dr. Dhokal,
I'm Dr. Glass.
and today we're going into Week 14 of the NFL season. Last week we talked about Week 13. Dustin, there's some exciting games this last weekend. I happened to catch the Chargers versus the Raiders in Las Vegas, which we'll talk about. But we're busting into Week 14, close to the end of the season, and we definitely had a few injuries this past week. I know you were about to bring a couple up before I hit record here. What were you saying there?
Yeah, so there was three basic ones I wanted to kind of touch upon because we haven't seen them highlighted as much, and I thought they were kind of relevant. Lamar Jackson's was a big one. I didn't, his was a PCL injury. So we've talked about ACL a lot, but we haven't talked about the PCL.
Right.
So not as common. It is one of the four ligaments. So just to recap, we got the ACL, the PCL, which are inside the knee, and then we have the two collateral ligaments on the sides, the MCL, which is on the inside of the knee, the LCL is on the outside of the knee, and they all have
sorry to interrupt, but I was going to say we talked about the MCL last week with Von Miller and briefly touched on that. So I'm glad that we have an opportunity to discuss, the other one of the four important ligaments of the knee, the PCL. Did you happen to catch the play in which that happened at all? The injury?
No, I was trying to look it up. I always try to get that way we have a little understanding of it, of how it might have happened. I kind of heard it that he kind of went down on it. I don't know. Did you see it?
I didn't see the mechanism of injury. I saw kind of like how it happened, but I didn't get to see like video or anything, specific. There's another injury with Lane Johnson, who you spoke about last week when he was talking about mental health. And I was able to see a video of that injury, which I guess I'll bring up now with you. When he got hit, he got chopped as he was going forward to make a downfield block. And somebody,
talking about Lane Johnson now?
Lane Johnson, yeah, just to switch gears for a second. And his foot was caught in the grass, and because it was grass, it gave out, right? And he kind of flipped forward. And so the comment was, if this was a turf field, he would have been most likely injured, And so it made me think of that.
Yeah, that's twice now, because that one, and then the week before there was another receiver. Now I can't remember who he was. Same kind of thing. That the same headline was, if this was on turf, it would have been a different story. Thank goodness it was on grass. Right. So it was kind of funny how, like, a few weeks ago, they had that big article from the NFL Players Association that we spoke about, which one's better, and then that they really there wasn't much difference between the two.
Inconclusive, right?
Yeah, but our opinion and many other people's opinion, find that the grass is the better choice. So it's just kind of interesting that we've had two, and that the reporters brought that up too. So I'm glad to see that. Who knows where it's going to go in the future? Seems like it's going the other trend. Everybody's putting in turf. I know my daughter's school is putting in turf at the university, and by I think next year or the year after, most D1 softball facilities will be turfed, which it's a game changer for a lot of the positions. Sure. And not everybody's happy about it, so we'll see. But seems like that's a trend.
That'll be a whole discussion, on how that changes the game itself, because it speeds up, I imagine, if I was having a discussion, but you being the softball dad would have a lot more insight on that specifically.
Yeah, it definitely changes the speed of the game. Both the ball coming off the bat, hitting the turf, getting to the grass quicker,
right?
Yeah, but then it also affects the bunts too. So there's a different play on dirt and on grass with a bunt or a slap. Softball, they have these slappers. So it's going to change the game up, especially if all the bigger schools are going that way. So
here's what I like, and it's the last thing I'll say on the turf, because we did have a full discussion on it on a previous episode, but it is interesting. I think it's a game a factor for sure. Um, you know, like I said, we could go more into it, but what I wanted to say on it was, I know Arizona has a field that is an all grass field that they slide in and slide out of the stadium. And so when I went to the Raiders game this weekend in Las Vegas, that was the first thing I noticed, is that it's a grass field. And the gentleman sitting next to me is a friend of a friend's, and he's a Raider fan like yourself. I was still nice to him, and
That's good.
yeah,
You've come a long way.
I've grown.
Yeah, that's good.
No, I'm just playing. He was saying that their field the same way, slides in, slides out. And I don't know why more places don't do that. That's all.
Yeah.
I know if you're in the East Coast, Buffalo, something like that, it's tough, but they have domed places. It was nice to see. I saw a few times where the turf kicked up. I just looking at different things. I was looking at the linemen when they were chopping and they were going against each other. And so, yeah, I mean, there were a few aggressive plays that maybe if it was a turf field, the outcome would have been negative. So it's hard to say, but I like to see the game on grass, even if it's in a dome, you can have it on grass. And I think that's the better option.
Yeah, no, I didn't realize that, and I think that's technology's there. So I would love to see. Maybe it'll come full circle, right? It goes in phases.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But thanks for bringing that up. I didn't realize. Haven't been to enough facilities or have heard about that. So
Well,
that's pretty cool.
my goal is to catch a game with you this season sometime. So we'll see.
All right.
The season's winding down. We'll see if that comes to fruition or not.
Well, I missed the boat. I should have bet you this week. I would. We should have bet a game. Whoever wins. And
Yeah. The possibilities were endless. You could have had anything. You could have said, you got to come down to my office. It could have been, who knows what, yeah,
Well,
you guys
funny
freaked it out. It was a good
because
game.
we never talked, and beforehand, like we said we were going to, and I mean, we talked, but we didn't talk about that. But
Yeah.
After the first quarter, because I was watching that game after the first quarter, I'm like, man, well, now we can at least do it now. But I didn't feel good. I didn't feel good. You guys had the momentum that first quarter.
Yeah.
Then I turned it off second quarter, came back towards the end and saw what we had done. So
Yeah, it was a good atmosphere. I always like to go to a new stadium and see what the facilities are like. I didn't walk around that much at the Raiders stadium. I happened just ironically to enter right in front of the section where I was at. And so I was like easy in, easy out, and didn't really mess around too much. But it was one of the few stadiums in the NFL that I haven't been to. So I was happy to check that off the list, even though I've been to Las Vegas the last couple of times we've played. I chose not to go to the game. And so it was nice to go. And it was a good game. Congratulations, sir. You guys beat us. Now we're 1-1 on the season. And I'd say it was a tough loss for the Chargers, just in the sense of momentum for the season.
Right.
I also will say you shouldn't play man-to-man coverage against Keenan Allen again, because that was a bad idea and you guys just didn't figure it out, or
Well,
maybe
I
it
was
was the play all game, who knows, but it didn't
I
work
was
out.
I was happy to see that he's making his comeback and he's doing well. That was a good game for him. So
I was watching him specifically on a few plays, and within a second, literally, plays 4 seconds, 3.5 seconds. In a second, I was like, oh, he's gone. Like that, and yeah, he was cooking you guys a little bit, but you guys got the victory, which is what matters. And kudos to you. But yeah, back to Lamar. So
so PC,
and that's a big deal on a couple levels. One, because it's a contract year for him, but more importantly, perhaps because he's the hub of that team, right? So
right. So I didn't see the play like you didn't see it, but typically those come, like we talked about the ACL, those are typically a hyperextension injury. These are a hyperflexion injury. That PCL is actually a thicker ligament, thicker and stronger than the ACL. So we typically don't, the ACL is a more common injury because it's not as strong and it's thinner and in the direction it goes. But the PCL, the mechanism, the PCL for basically protects from the backward motion of that tibia and the femur. And so when you get this hyperflexion and the knee kind of gets forced down into the ground or pushed back, so those are two basic mechanisms we'll see. One where the athlete will come down on the ground, get his knee pinned behind or his ankle pinned behind, and that hyperflexion landed on it. tear it that way, or with the lineman, it doesn't happen as often, but or on a tackle where sudden force to that shin bone, where
Sure.
the tibia will go backwards real sudden on a deceleration type thing, and tear it. Another way for the average person, and why you should never sit with your feet up on the dashboard, get in a car accident,
Right.
or even if they're not up there, but when your knees get slammed into the dashboard from a car accident, that's another common way that we see a PCL injury on a day-to-day basis. But so it normally does not completely tear like an ACL because it's thicker. So we get a lot of partial tears or
Mhm.
overstretches, grade ones, grade twos. So it's kind of a lesser mechanism or a lesser injury in that sense. It does swell immediately. It typically does not hurt as bad. So you might see the athlete kind of,
As
you
bad as
see
your
them.
ACL.
Right, where the ACL, you'll typically hear a pop, get the swelling, have a lot of pain. Where the PCL, you're not necessarily going to get that pop because it doesn't fully rupture, and it will swell up, but it doesn't hurt as bad. So you can see the athlete kind of moving around. Doesn't look like they're injured that bad, but it's a significant injury.
Yeah,
So that's why it can
instability.
be deceiving to people.
Absolutely. When you were giving that description, I was understanding what you were saying as I was visualizing it. Two of the more common ways, one of the common ways that I see it, and one way that I'm surprised I haven't seen it, and I want to get your opinion on that. Um, but I'm thinking of like a quarterback dropping back, and whether he throws the ball or not, somebody comes up behind him, rolls up on his ankle, and as he falls back, he kind of gets bent over with his foot or lower leg caught underneath somebody. So that hyperflexion there, like you were saying, can cause it. The other thing I'm always surprised on, Dustin, is in soccer when people score goals and they run and they slide on both their knees. Every time I see that, I think to myself, it's like the kicker who goes crazy
Yeah,
after he makes a
celebrate.
field goal and then
Yeah,
like hurts his knee. Yeah.
right.
I forget what his name was. I almost said Garoppolo, but we'll speak about him
Yeah,
and his injury
yeah,
here in a little bit. Uh, he had a brother in the NFL. Anyways, his name escapes me, but
yeah,
famously did that back in the day.
yep.
So yeah, those two mechanisms. So, anyways, for somebody who's listening, who's trying to figure that out, it'd be like sliding on your knees. That's the hyperflexion. Somebody rolls up on your ankle, you fall backwards without your foot getting out, and that hyperflexion or bending of the knee. That's
Yeah.
that's the etiology or the
Yeah, yep. And so basic treatment's the same as other kinds of, the initial is the rest, ice, compress, elevate, get the swelling down. That's the immediate care. Grade one, again, the recovery time is not as long because it's just an overstretch, right?
Mhm.
So basically it's going like this, whereas a grade two will go like this, grade three will be complete, right? So for
That's a good
those
description.
watching, yeah, for those watching, I guess for those listening, I just did a demonstration, but basically a grade one is where the fibers get stretched a little, but they're still intact. Grade two, you get a little micro tearing out of there. And typically with grade two, that's when you'll get some bruising. So that's one way we, on like ankles or what else would get an ankle or a knee, when we see bruising, then we know it's at least a grade two on a
Hamstring.
sprain. Yep, a hamstring. Yep. So on the strains. So grade three would be a complete tear where those fibers actually rupture. So each grade will take longer to heal. So grade one, typically at 2 to 4 weeks, because we're just dealing with getting the inflammation down and then stabilizing the structures around, but you have no tissue damage. The grade two, we're looking, twice that, 6 to 8 weeks in length, because now we got to start repairing some of that tissue, and it is more unstable. Typically with the grade one, there's the stability's intact.
Right.
Grade two, now you got some instability. And so that's where the longer recovery time takes. And then the
Mhm.
grade three, a lot of times requires surgery. So then it just, takes longer even
Recovery
then.
is
And
longer.
that's going to be the 6 to 12 months, like a ACL kind of,
Yeah.
same type of recovery, different type of exercises that you'll do, but yeah.
Yeah, along those lines of grade one, grade two, grade three, 2 points. One, I had somebody, since we're talking about grades, right? I had a younger elementary student. He was like in 7th grade, maybe 6th grade, perhaps. And I was discussing that. He says he wants to be a professional baseball player. And so that's cool of him to already know. And he sounded very determined. And I wish I could fast forward like 20 years and see
Yeah.
what happens. But I was describing an injury that his mom had to him. And I had a hairband with me. Not for myself.
I'm not even gonna, I did not want to bring it up.
I have a can of them that somebody gave me for when I have female patients come in.
For those listening, Paul has no hair, and he just lifted up his hat when he's talking about having a hairband in his office. Anyways,
so I happen to have one handy, right? And I showed him. I said, "Hey, this is a grade 1. It's like, this is the size of this hairband, and this is its normal size. And now I stretched this rubber band, and now this rubber band is larger than its normal size. That's like a grade 1. It's stretched." And then I said, if this is like cut, but not cut all the way through, that's a grade 2. It's now damaged, just like you did the hand example. And then completely cut, boom, that's a rupture. That's a grade 3. And there was like a little light bulb, you know.
Yeah.
It was like, oh,
that's great.
So I thought that was kind of cool, and it's easy to visualize that. You know, it's not quite as simple or as elementary as that, but it I think it's important for patients to understand the injury, and so at whatever basic level you can explain it, I think that's important. And then maybe that's the framework that you can start to build some more education on, right? So
yeah,
that was.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to
interrupt.
you were talking about that education. One thing I like, once you know the grades, grade 1, 2, 3, and then you also know the healing time, 2 to 4 weeks, 3 to 6, 6 to 8, 6 to 12 months. Then you can, when you're listening to the news or see it in an article, and like with Lamar's, it said he's going to be out probably 3 weeks. So right there, we can speculate, oh, okay, in that time frame, it's probably a grade 1. And it's kind of cool. And that's, for us, that's, easy one right away for us to understand.
I don't even really think twice about it, to be honest. I'm sure you don't either,
Yeah, for the listener, it's kind of, what I'm hoping for is that people will take some of this information we give them, and it will make listening or watching sports and seeing things a little more enjoyable, maybe, because then they'll have a little more, understanding of what's going on to things.
No,
so
I think that's right on. And the other thing too is about those timelines. Those are general average guidelines, right? And so if you're younger versus older, that makes a difference. Really, you can adjust those pretty aggressively. And so that takes me to my next point about Jimmy Garoppolo.
Let me say something real quick on that. I was talking to one of my mentors today for business, and we were talking about treatment plans, and just going over. It's always good talk shop and talk about trying to figure out better treatment plans for different things. And I was not complaining or not bitching about something, but just having one of those moments where I was trying to explain to him why I was coming up with certain treatment plans. And for 15 years, my treatment plans have been primarily based around pain management, right? A player comes in, we get them adjusted, we get them treated, do some soft tissue, they're out on the field right after, and they get off the table, thanks doc, feeling good. So my treatment plan is totally different than my treatment plan for somebody that needs, corrective care, for long term, right? And he brought up the point, and he's like, and I was telling him, man, like back in the day, he's all, well, what's the age difference between those guys that were that got off the table and went out and played versus the people you have coming in on a regular that aren't going right out to play? And I'm like, yeah, 23 versus 45 is a lot different treatment plan, right? Because what you had just said, the treatment time is going to be different. The recovery time is going to be different. So you have to adjust your treatment plan accordingly. And I hate the whole thing. And I always tell my patients, because the common mantra, getting old sucks, right? That you'll hear that all the time with patients
Maybe.
in some version of that, right?
Yeah.
And so I said, man, if I would have started writing that down every time, or had a patient write that on my wall every time somebody said it, right when we started, my walls would be covered, and it would be kind
Covered.
of cool, right?
Yeah.
Because the reality is, yeah, getting old sucks. But again, we always say, hey, it's a number. I got 90-year-olds doing cartwheels. I got 90-year-olds doing Ironmans.
Right.
You know, why? What's the difference between those two, right? And we talked
I
about that
say
last
maybe
time.
I say maybe getting old sucks for most people today, but maybe it doesn't have to in the future. Maybe getting old means, you work till a certain age that's way earlier than it used to be a generation ago. And then you enjoy your life and you travel or see the world or do things that you like. Or maybe you start a second career of your hobbies or
Right.
things of your interests. Maybe work is just a phase, just like schooling is a phase for most
Right.
people. For you and I, we continue to learn. Like, I kind of feel dumb on a day that I don't learn something, to be
Right.
honest, like, even if I didn't have to open a book necessarily, like just using my device, I can still pick up a tidbit.
Tons
And
of
so
knowledge out there.
I'm
Yeah.
on a tidbit a day kind of mission. And yeah, I mean, I think it adds up and it's important. So I think that there's a good chance that by the time, we get to whatever retirement age is, that getting old doesn't suck. I was
Right.
saying to a patient today, ironically, that I think, and I think I mentioned it perhaps with you, that sports medicine, I think, or just medicine in general, is going to continue to accelerate, and maybe there's going to be a thing where instead of getting a total knee replacement, just like somebody told me about eyeglasses, that in Britain they call them 45s and not eyeglasses, because at 45 your vision goes to shit, right? So he was making a joke with me, being like, "Oh, we call those 45s," and so maybe just like that, maybe when you at 55s you get stem cell injections in your knee, and that keeps you mobile as you go into your 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. So I'm optimistic, at least I should say, that there'll be more of that advancement, and maybe getting old for our generation doesn't mean the same thing that it meant for our parents' generation. And I know for a fact for your kids and any future generations,
Mhm.
that's definitely the case. And um, when you were talking about timeline on getting better and how you can affect that, I think some people think 20s, 30s, or 70s, 80s. You mentioned 45, right in my wheelhouse, right? And so there's a statistical change, a difference, if you're a 20-year-old, or if you're a 40-year-old, or if you're a 60-year-old. So there's not just young and old. There's shades of gray in there, and but there's other things too that I think can affect that. And so that was my main point: is in any injury, diet, uh, a handful of different things that you can do, sports medicine wise, therapy wise, and a handful of things you can do at home.
Yeah.
Simple things like ice,
Yep.
make a big
Yeah.
difference.
Well, the reality, like we're talking about, we're all going to get older, right? Depending
Sure.
on how old we last is, depending on a lot of factors. But and the reality is, hormones start changing, in your 30s. That's
Right.
the reality. We can't stop that, but we can, like you said, we can do things that help it along the way, right? And having the knowledge, and there's certain things that we can't avoid, right? But I think we have to age smarter, not harder,
Yeah.
if that's one thing I could say. And because, yeah, the reality is, we start hurting more. It's harder to get up out of chairs. It's harder to get up out of bed,
Yeah.
but it's also the mindset. And I've learned that through treating athletic patients that I have that are in their 70s and 80s, that tell me, oh man, I wish I was 60s. And then my 60-year-olds are in here complaining, and I
Right.
remind them, I'm like, man, I just had a 70, 80-year-old in here doing lots of cool stuff that wish they were your age. And
Right.
when you put it in perspective, just like if I think about it, man, I wish I was in my 30s. But I also remember when I was in my 30s being in a lot of pain also.
Right.
And so it's
It's
like
relative.
100%. So that's all I try to get to my patients, is like, I get the pains, I get the aches, and and feeling older, but how are we going to age? What's our decision? We have choices to make, right? And so I don't know. There's no easy answer, and everybody's going to address it differently. I had one of my patients in here the other day. She was complaining about a lot of aches and pains, and frustrations. And I totally sympathize with her, and I say, I get it. And then she went on to tell me how her son is complaining about his back and he never stops complaining. And
Mm,
I looked at her, I said, where do you think he learned that?
right.
I
Yeah.
said, all he hears about is you complaining about your back. I
Yeah.
said,
And that's
he
her.
thinks that's normal. And
Yeah.
she's all, no, 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 it's not. I'm like, you just got done,
Yeah.
20,
No,
30
that's
minutes telling
factual.
me.
I think that's factual,
Yeah. So I said, we just need to start realizing that and be careful, you know, how we present things to other people. And I had another patient the other day, got out of the chair and she moaned and groaned. And I
Yeah.
asked her, I said, do you moan and groan when nobody's around?
Yeah.
And
Good
she's
question.
like, what do you mean? I said, I'm just curious. It's a survey I take with all my patients. Do they always moan and complain, or is it only when there's an audience? And she kind of got like, not mad, but she didn't
Yeah.
like where this was going. And I said, no,
Sure.
I'm just curious,
Yeah.
but because I find it curious because I find
I
myself,
like the question.
I don't, like, or if I do moan when I get up, I'm looking around like, why did I do that? It helped me at none at all. Like, there's no benefit to moaning or groaning.
There's
And usually
something.
it's because you want other people to know that you're not feeling well. And it's
Yeah.
like, do we really need to do it? Because they don't care. They're just
Yeah.
glad it's not them,
Yeah.
type thing. So
Yeah. I've been sighing a lot more, and I realized like, oh, I'm either tired or I need to like, stop being a little baby about it. It's kind of my thought on it. But I do catch myself sometimes getting up out of bed or in the morning, and I'm like, bro, I need to stretch. That's kind of my first thought. But that's an interesting one. I'm gonna keep a little more observant on that, and ask as well, and see what the answer is on that. What did you find out? What's the majority of the
Well,
answer?
she came back the following week and randomly out of the blue, she's all, just so you know, I do moan by myself. I'm
By
like,
myself.
oh, I
Okay,
forgot
good.
I even,
So she thought about that. That's
yeah,
awesome.
I'm like, oh, well, thank you for, filling out my survey.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but it got her thinking too about, does she really need to complain?
Well, I mean, you said something that if I could highlight a conversation, it would be, you said words are powerful or something to that effect. And, or,
Mhm.
I think that that's accurate. And to take that just one step further, thoughts are powerful too, right? And so I do see that difference between people who are high level performers, whether that's athleticism or, I think if you play music at a high level, that's performance, that's under pressure. I think if you're an actor or a dancer, that's performance, that's under pressure. I know you've been under pressure for exams, for
Mhm.
sports, for life, I'm sure as well. And I think the more that you're under pressure, the more calm you are in the future when you have, a high pressure situation. Um, whatever the reason is for that.
Yeah.
But I always like to remind my patients it's not just a timeline of 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. If you don't like that timeline, there's things you can do to accelerate it.
Yeah.
Even if you're not a healthy eater, you get injured and you want to play in that high school game, like eat healthier for the next month. It's going to make a difference. You don't have to have always had healthy food, but stop drinking sodas and eating a bunch of junk and start nourishing your body so your cells can regenerate quicker and healthier. It's yeah, I feel like you can make a significant difference, which um, you know, I wanted to bring up Jimmy Garoppolo and his injury. I know you were speaking about Lamar
No,
Jackson
I'm
and his
done.
injury,
Yeah.
but it's interesting because we had some high profile. They're all high profile quarterbacks. If you're one of the 32 in the NFL, you're high profile. That's my thought on
Right.
it, right? So, but Tua got hurt. Tua Tagovailoa, he got hurt. Miami
His
Dolphins
ankle.
quarterback ankle. We talked about Lamar Jackson with his PCL, his knee injury, the ligament in the back of the knee, and you know I knew something had happened in the 49er game because I'm at the Charger Raider game and my phone's vibrating. I'm in a Bay Area group chat with all my cousins, and Jimmy Garoppolo had gone down with an ankle injury. And I text back, did it look bad? And they said it didn't look good. And then it was like, oh, he got carted off. And I was like, like, if somebody gets hurt and they get carted off and they're not the starting QB, you might think like, oh, maybe it's precautionary. But if you're a starting quarterback or you're starting, if you're that guy,
Yeah.
then if you can get off the field, you're going to walk off the field, hobble off the field, hop off the field, whatever it is. So that told me, I was like, oh, that's not good. They thought it was a broken foot, or they didn't know what it was, and so it
Yeah.
turns out it is a broken foot. But it's a shorter timeline, which right away, when you're like, oh, that's kind of fun to know when people say things on TV, what that must mean or speculate on that. I said, oh, he must not have had ligament damage, right?
Right.
And about 20 minutes before we went on, I went through my kind of normal channels of checking things out, and
Recap.
yeah, just recap it, and it said, so X-ray is positive on the broken foot, MRI imaging a level deeper than the X-ray, right? Negative for any ligament damage. And that's great news if you're a 49er fan. That's great news if you're Jimmy Garoppolo. He will be able to hopefully come back for the playoffs if they make the playoff. But it gives a team a little bit of light. It gives the patient, in this case, Jimmy Garoppolo, a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, something to aim for. And that shorter timeline is because it's just waiting for the bone to heal or the fracture to heal, as opposed to waiting for an ankle that had surgery because of ligamentous tissue damage, injury that takes a longer time to heal, which would have meant his season's over.
Yeah, yeah, and I saw the same. I was following that since the weekend, and it first said, out for, I forget what the timeline was, but it was out significant, because they thought it was torn, and I think they at one point thought it was a Lisfranc, injury, which I think yeah. So, but then another headline I saw, good news, only a broken bone, and it was like, okay, well, let's talk about that. Why is it good that it's only broken and not, ligament damage as well? And I think you touched upon it. One is that now you don't only have, with the ankle ligament injury, typically you're going to have to deal with both the bone, either contusion or a fracture, and ligament stuff. But the bigger thing is that bone has a better blood supply to it than ligaments. Ligaments have a very small, or they have less of a blood and nerve supply, so it takes them longer to get the nutrients needed,
Yeah,
or it's harder to get the nutrients needed to speed up that accelerated healing. So
slower
whereas the
timeline.
bone, yeah, so that's why when you hear in sports medicine, oh, it's way better if you fracture it than if you tear it, right? And it's typically comes down to the nutrient delivery system going to the different tissues. So
Yeah, no, that's a great way of putting it. That's 100% accurate. And I didn't always know that. I didn't. When I was in even college taking sports medicine classes, it's like, oh man, he broke his foot. That's terrible. Like a sprained ankle would have been better. A high ankle sprain, I would have got that test question wrong. 20 years ago or something. But yeah, so that's hopefully will heal quickly, especially if it's a hairline fracture versus a major break, perhaps. Only they know that, right? But I would like that to be the case much more than, especially a high ankle sprain or more extensive damage and tearing of any ligaments of the
yeah,
ankle, depending on how the injury happened.
and I know me and you, we'd be hyping up the PMF big time. PMF is FDA
Every day,
approved for bone healing. I mean,
every day.
yeah,
Yes.
so it's like you can put that on right away. If they have a cast, a boot, you can put that on right away. You're
Yeah.
getting microcirculation to that tissue. So I know me and you would be doing that. I'd also be doing the hyperbarics 100%,
Yeah.
getting blood flow to those areas, spilling it out, the oxygen out to all the tissues, allowing more oxygenation. So, but getting back to that difference between the bone and the ligament, like you said, back in school, we would have thought, differently. And I think my younger self, I always thought it was worse because it was both bone and tissue. That's
Hmm.
why it's a worse injury, not because of the blood supply. And that's kind of what I
Yeah.
want our listeners to kind of, the take home note is, it's not that there's more involved with tissue and bone, it's that the how it's healing is different. So
100%. No, that's a great point.
yeah,
And that's, if you don't explain that to a patient, they might not understand that. And I know with things like PEMF, I used the Beamer unit today on a patient for a particular issue, and she got up and knocked on the door as I was with another patient when I got her dialed in, and she said, so I opened the door. I said, "Excuse me," and she goes, "It's not working. I don't feel anything." And I said, "Oh no." So I went back in the room and explained, "Hey, you're just going to lay on here," and then I gave her a little bit of an explanation on how that works, and she's always on her phone for stuff. So I said, "Here, you can read up on it as you lay here for the next 16 minutes."
Yeah. That's one thing I like about Beamer. I use several different PMF units, but the one thing I like about Beamer, and I don't know if your unit came with it, but it came with the EMF reader in the back. So
Yeah,
you can literally show the patient how high up that EMF is going
right.
away from their body, and it kind of envelops them, and you bring it over here and you bring it over here. And every time it buzzes, it's kind of, if people don't understand, might be kind of witchcrafty or hokey, but you
Because it
explain
buzzes,
to them,
right?
hey,
Yeah,
this is a measurement of the electromagnetic field coming off the pad going through your body.
right.
So down here it's a higher pitch as we get away, but you can still see 3, 4, 5 inches, you're still getting EMF. So it's basically forming this like sleeping bag or cocoon around you of electromagnetic field. So it's really cool. So
Also,
um,
not the same as the EMFs that you'll catch in a negative manner if you're wearing your
correct.
AirPods or you leave your Wi-Fi on.
Great point.
Different technology. The Beamer unit is technology that NASA uses in their spacesuits, and I know some of your high-level athletes have used it in the past, and I'm surprised that not every single one of my NFL guys and otherwise haven't purchased it. Basically, if you're making a pro level athlete salary, you should have one of these in your house and use it every day.
It is
That's
crazy to me. It is crazy to me.
I know
I can tell you my European patients. So I have a lot of European, especially in motocross, supercross,
they get
you
it,
know,
right?
well, that's how I first learned about it, probably
Uh-huh.
12, 15 years ago, before Beamer even came across to the United States and
Gotcha.
became a thing. My Europeans were bringing it over, and they had these units, and they were telling me what they were doing with it. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I got my hands on one a long time ago through those connections, and it was
They
a
do.
game changer. And I'm like, I don't understand why everybody doesn't, like you said, this should. And in Europe, they literally put it on hospital gurneys,
Right.
so every paramedic, as soon as they put a patient on it, they're getting this low frequency EMF. NICU units, so these little babies, preemies, are
That's great.
going right on these PMF mats, these low
Yeah.
frequency PMF mats, to help with microcirculation. um you know uh yeah, it's just commonplace out there, and it's because it's low frequency. It's basically the same frequency that the earth resonates at, so it's very healthy. I can't think of any condition that can't benefit from increased microcirculation. Now, what's
Right.
cool about PMF, and this, is it doesn't vasodilate the blood vessel.
Right.
Okay, what it does is it helps with the blood vessels themselves, the red blood cell. It declumps them and allows it to pass through the vascularity already. So
Like a
whereas a
like a
lot of
traffic
other,
jam.
yes, exactly. Whereas a lot of other devices will cause vasodilation. Well, what if you have a condition where you do not want vasodilation? Well, then you have an issue if you're providing that modality. Well, low frequency pulse EMF is very, very safe. It's very, there's only a few contraindications, and usually those are because somebody's immune system is so compromised and they're taking medications where we don't want to boost their immune system, and they know pulse electromagnetic field boost their immune system that high. A good analogy I use with my patients is like if I took a tube, a big old cylinder, and
Hmm.
dumped spaghettios down that. Okay,
Right.
those spaghettio noodles are the red blood cells, and if it's sluggish, or what we call electrical smog or swampy blood, where it's just sludging down through the tube, that's normal blood flow when something's not healthy due to environmental toxins, chemical toxins, whatever, physical, emotional toxins, right? Now, if you take each one of those spaghettios and stacked them and let it go through the cylinder, it's going to pass through really quickly, right? Well,
Right.
that's what PMF basically does. It allows the current to the positive and negative ions to stack those red blood cells and pass through very quickly. So you're increasing that circulation big time, which will deliver more oxygen to the target tissue faster. So it's really cool.
And so that's how it accelerates healing, whether that's bone or tissue.
Yep.
That's the mechanism and by which it does it. So it's not like, it is revolutionary and it's not, it's very basic in how it heals, but it's a very effective therapy in how it works.
Well, yeah, and other cultures have known it for years. If you go out and, like I tell a lot of my patients that don't have access, if you're on vacation or if you're somewhere, get near running water. Running water will kick over and increase your EMF, your the good EMF. Go near the beach. We live near the beach. Go crashing wave. Go near a waterfall. Go to the hotel fountain. Sit by the fountain. Right. Yeah. Take the rubber shoes off. The soles, and stand in the grass and walk in the grass. Those are all areas.
Is that as effective as using something like a beamer unit in your opinion, or is
not at all? So we're using technology. So yes and no. So it is just as effective in my opinion, but it takes a lot longer. So what we can do in 8 minutes might take an hour exposed near, I don't know the actual timeline.
No, that makes sense to me though.
Yeah. So you will get the same benefit, but it will take longer. So that's what's cool about technology and NASA and developing all this technology is they're figuring out a way how to take nature and accelerate those properties. The same thing with laser technology. They use the natural, tendencies of how the mitochondria produce more ATP from sunlight, and they harnessed it into a laser and got those frequencies specific to stimulate your cells. You can get the same benefit going out in the sun, but we can do it a lot in 30 seconds, what we'd have to do in 15, 20, 30 minutes of sunlight, right? So pretty cool.
It is very cool. It's very cool because it's, if you think maybe 20, 40 years back within our lifetime, that technology didn't exist. And, I keep talking about the extrapolation forward 10, 20, 30, 40 years. I'm really excited as to where it goes. And I really believe that there's going to be, a more of a kick towards health and longevity because of it, So yeah, that's really interesting. I think
go ahead. No, I have another topic based on what you just said, but go ahead and finish the.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say it's we're stubborn creatures, it's unless you feel something or unless it's immediate or unless you can grasp it mentally, we're resistant to change, typically, I mean, humans in general, and so sometimes I think of particular athletes and I'm like, hey, this is a few $1,000 investment for you, less than $10,000 investment for you, which is, a fraction of 1 week's game check. And, using this every single day would probably increase your career longevity. It would most likely increase how you feel on the day to day and perhaps even prevent some injuries or maybe accelerate the injuries that you have or accelerate the healing to the injuries you have, more specifically speaking. And so, I sometimes think that if that beamer mat had a little bit of heat, people would be, ooh, and it's like, and we're just stubborn creatures, like not everybody understands the science. I didn't use it until I fully understood it because I don't want to use something on myself, first of all, but also anyone who's a pro athlete unless I 1000% believe in it, so it took me, I had to understand it and use it before I was able to feel comfortable using it on someone who gets paid to play,
and talking on that, using it on ourselves or doing the research on our, that's what me and you do. We get people come to us with technology all the time because they know who we work with, they know what we do, and they want us to use their newest equipment, right? So I don't do anything until I do the research. And like before I even got a PMF mat, I did 2 years of research on it before I even, and then I wanted to know the ins and outs of all the different companies. I read all the bad reviews. I dug into all the bad reviews. So my point is too, like a lot of people that don't know much about PMF might go in and they've only heard us talk about Beamer. So they might go look up Beamer. You'll
Right.
see tons of crap about Beamer online and why
Yeah.
it's not good and why it's, so I challenge anybody that has any questions about it, please feel free to talk to me. I would love to explain, why. And like I said, I use a number of different companies, so it's not that I'm not trying to sell Beamer, or I'm not doing it for that reason, but I like to educate people on PEMF,
Right.
regardless, and why I might have chosen Beamer or I might have chosen another company. So
Yeah.
I just
One
wanted to
of the
mention that, because if anybody does look it up, they'll be like, why are these guys using this? There's so much bad information out there, and I can honestly explain why those. And
Yeah, I mean, it comes
anyways,
down to a little bit of a personal choice. One is the technology, which is PEMF, and the other is a brand, right? So
mhm,
I'm always open to uh, companies that do it better, or you know different types of technology when they come out. But you got to,
yeah,
at least I feel like I have to do the research. I want to be able to speak intelligently on it. If a team doctor, a team ortho, anybody, a patient for that matter, is wanting to know more about it, wanting to be taught, they have intelligent questions to ask, I want to be able to respond appropriately and feel comfortable and not be bullshitting somebody, be
right,
like, this is why it is, this is why I like it, this is why I don't. This is, I'm attracted to things that are like above all, do no harm type of
right.
situation. And
Gotcha.
so if I know it's not going to have any slide back, but it's going to have some benefit, even if it's a micro benefit, I'm usually on board with that. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, is like, why don't you mentioned, why don't these players throw out the money for that? Because it's a fraction of what they're gonna do in one day.
Yeah.
In my mind, if they had really understood it, there is zero harm that's going to come from it. Even if they don't feel like it's doing anything, there's nothing to lose, everything to gain. So
Great.
even if they had trust in what we're saying and would at least say, okay, this is basically pennies to me. If
Yeah.
it can give me any ounce of speeding my recovery, you have nothing to lose, everything to
Right.
gain. Give it a try. I don't even like saying that. I don't like, you do or do not, like Yoda says, right? That's
Yeah.
my favorite quote.
Yeah.
Do or do not. You don't try, because
Yeah.
trying implies that it might not work, or that there's some disbelief in it. So we do it. Anyways, obviously we're both passionate. I do have somebody that will come uh, on our podcast and talk fully on PMF.
I would love that.
He's reached out to me a couple of times, so we'll hook that up in the near future. He could be one of our first guests, since it's relevant in what we talk about, and he can explain their technology and different things too. But
No, I think that's awesome. I would love to, because I think it's, we talk about these things all the time. There's a multitude of things that um, patients can do that are available for purchase or available for use in different places that do accelerate the healing and the timeline. And so in my cousin group chat talking about Jimmy G, they said, somebody link P up with Jimmy, and I said,
yeah,
you know, uh, one of my
yeah,
cousins is neighbors with one of the guys on the team. And I said, hey, just if you see him, let him know. I guess I could probably reach out to somebody and say, hey, can you reach out to so and so on the team? But what I found is when things happen organically, they're better than if someone's like reaching out, like, hey,
yeah,
so and so from such and such who treats so and so said that they can help you. I don't really feel like that comes off great. And so
yeah,
if by chance or organically the introduction occurred with him or with anybody else, I think that that's a better way of going about it. But just in the family cousin group chat, they were giving me some shit. They're like, he wouldn't even come out. He's a Charger homer. He probably wouldn't even. He's a homer. He probably wouldn't even come and help Jimmy come back, because if he came back, he knows that they'd win the Super Bowl. And I
right,
said, oh, okay, well, it
yeah,
all rests on my shoulders then, right? Like
yeah,
but no, I was happy to hear, all joking aside, that his timeline was shorter. It seems like, and I'm sure he's going to do all the things that he can,
yeah,
one of the acupuncturists with the team. And I know that they do a lot of soft tissue work, a lot of acupuncture. I'm sure there's other modalities that we use that they're
yeah,
using. Um, so I'm excited to see how he progresses and
Yeah.
what that timeline is. There's more to come on that. We'll see how that story develops through the season. We'll
Yeah.
be tracking it week to week all the way through the Super Bowl. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping he's back by the playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. Oh, yeah. I like watching him. Even though I don't like the team, but I like watching him.
Right, right.
Um, anyways, talking about technology, and you keep mentioning, hey, the future of healthcare and sports medicine, think about where we were 20 years ago, think about where we're 20. Well, I don't, I'm sure, Matt Stafford's injury this week, was kind of a big one
Yeah,
for the Rams, right? I mean, it's a big one for him. It could be
sure.
life-changing for him. He had a spinal cord contusion, right?
Yeah.
So I tried to find how it happened. I don't know if they're saying or showing. I didn't see any play. I don't know if it was one specific hit. Did you happen to see?
I didn't. I thought it was interesting that initially they said they were keeping him out because of, as I understand it, post concussion syndrome, right? So they said he had a concussion, and it was like, oh, he's not cleared from protocol, and so it sounded pretty standard.
Yeah.
Also, the Rams season's kind of a wrap at this point. Let's be honest, and so he is a franchise quarterback, and they're going to really err on the side of caution always, but
Yeah.
especially when there's nothing to play for, so to
Yeah.
speak. But no, I didn't see the play to answer your question, and
Yeah.
I was interested. I thought it was interesting that they went from concussion to spinal cord contusion. I wonder if they always knew that, or like how it is when they let information out to the press. And so my thought was, I wonder how that happened, and I wonder how serious it is, and I hope it's not that bad.
Yeah, that's why I kind of wish I could see more on it. I didn't see any video or anything because it's kind of interesting, but what I
Let's talk about what that
read.
is first of all. Like
So
how's that
basically,
different from a concussion?
yeah, well, so the concussion is, like we talked about the soft brain getting rattled around in the hard, rigid, spiky parts of the skull getting
Hmm.
kind of damaged in there, and having all the kind of some symptoms we've talked about with headaches, loss of, well, loss of consciousness would be really bad, but the
Hmm.
fuzziness, hard to concentrate, all those kind of disorientation
Sure.
to the fencing, posture, all those kind of things where they have to go through the protocol. Now, that's what was initially reported, and then later on they were talking about he had a neck injury that also, in combination with, um, uh, I think it was, numbness or loss of feeling in his lower extremities, both legs. So
Scary.
that's where it was more, significant at that point.
Yeah.
And then I guess I'm assuming he had an MRI that showed that there was a contusion on the spinal cord itself. So, which typically would be, and I don't know his case specific, but typically that middle cervical area, C3, 4, 5, when strained or damaged, could cause lower extremity. Because typically the nerves in the neck, the motor nerves and the sensory nerves, we typically talk about upper extremity
Right.
issues. So there has to be some significant compression on the spinal cord to affect the lower extremity. So that's where
Yeah.
they got more, that's where it got elevated in seriousness because he had lower extremity symptoms. And
Yeah.
so that's where, and so,
From head trauma.
yeah, from head trauma. And a contusion, like we've talked about in the past, is a bruise, right? So, and typically when you have a spinal cord contusion, there's going to be increased swelling and sometimes some micro bleeding from those micro vessels,
Hmm.
in that area. So that's a pretty significant trauma when
Right.
you're talking about a very small canal. The spinal canal is not that big.
Right.
So there had to have been some compression, some swelling enough to, affect the spinal cord and the nerves affecting the lower extremities. So that's pretty scary. So that could be a career-ending So him and his family have to have some decision making going on, and I'm sure he's gonna, be consulting with a lot of spinal people, because if he gets hit again, it could be very catastrophic. I mean, it could be catastrophic at the worst. Um, but that's an injury where, you don't mess around with. So that's why they took him out for the season, because one bad blow. So I'm assuming, with those, typically there's some underlying conditions as well, like spinal cord stenosis from some arthritic osteoarthritis,
Mhm.
some foraminal compression,
Yeah.
where the holes where the nerve exits, it was
And
compressed.
they would be aware of that from the annual physicals. He's had previous MRIs, like, he could have a little disc extrusion of some sort that isn't enough or wasn't enough to operate on previously.
Yeah,
There's various things that could be going on. So we're just,
right.
kind of talking based off our experience and based off the information that they've released so far.
Yeah, so it's all speculation. We're just kind of going off of the news reports and the symptom patterns, like you said, and from our
That's a
experiences
very
with it.
accurate,
Yeah.
logical, step-by-step way of thinking. When
Mhm.
I first heard that, I thought it was a typo when they said lower extremity, because in my thought process was, oh, he's out for concussion.
Yeah.
He either hit his head or had the whiplash. With that, sometimes having had, 8, 9 myself, I know that there's some swelling, some contusion that can happen in the soft tissue around the neck, especially if there's a whiplash mechanism or a trauma mechanism. And so that's what I was thinking. And I thought, well, normally that upper extremity, cervical nerves is upper extremity type
Yeah.
numbness, tingling in the fingers, weakness, shooting pain down the arms. So I said, oh, they must have had that wrong. And then, like you just spoke on, lower extremity, I was like, oh man,
That's
that's not good.
significant. That's
Like that's why
significant
they put him
trouble.
on the IR, right? And
Yeah.
at least
Indefinitely for the rest of the season.
it's so, but that's a good thing in my opinion, because that will give him the right amount of time to make the right decision. If this was early in the season, they said, well, we'll check you in 6 weeks and the swelling's gone down. And do you want to come back? And there's all these other mitigating factors that now have influence upon you. That's not great. And I think for something like this, distance creates perspective. And
Yeah.
with the time away from the game, especially when it's not in season, then you can sit down and see, is this serious, or is this one of those things where I need to be very careful, and if it happens again, then I need to consider it. Because there's
Yeah.
sometimes that there's the one more, if this happens again, you want to have that conversation previous. The
Yeah.
guys that I treat, I talk about that previous, right? Is like, okay, you have this, make up something, I don't even want to jinx it or speak it,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, you recovered from that, how many more of these are you going to have before it's the one more, and then I know that's it, right?
Yeah.
Because in the moment it's hard to make that decision. And then as an athlete and as a competitor, you want to leave the game and you want to leave the field on your own terms. And so even if there's a 1% chance, those guys are already the 1%.
Yeah.
So
Right.
they're going to take that one. Like, I'll bet on myself on the 1%,
Yeah.
right? Like, that's it.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's probably
So
why,
now,
yeah. So
well, now he has to make some decisions. So it's one of those things that if he decides not to come back because he's got a championship ring, he's got a Super Bowl ring, he doesn't have to come back, right? He doesn't have, he could say, I've done everything I needed to do. I've gotten what
proudly,
and,
yeah,
I'm just going to hang it up now because it's not worth it to me. He doesn't have to have surgery for something like this, because like a bruise, once the swelling goes down, if he has those arthritic joints, he can live with those. He just has to keep his soft tissue healthy, keep his
right,
mobility going, and not allow it to progress, right?
right.
So there's tons of people living with degenerative joints and arthritic and stenosis. So if he has some of that underlying, once they get the swelling down, he doesn't have to have surgery typically. Now, if he decides he wants to play and he's got bony stenosis, which means that the 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 canal where the spinal cord is passing through has been narrowed. A
Hmm.
lot of people know about, uh, you know, heart attacks and atherosclerosis and all that, and their blood clotting, effects, and they can
Right.
picture the blood vessels getting plaqued up and
Narrowing.
narrowing, right?
Right.
Well, if you take that same analogy and talk about bone, well, you got two major holes in the spine. One where the spinal cord goes from your brainstem all the way down, and then that's the spinal cord, and the bony column that is
Spinal
protects it,
canal.
and then exiting out of the spinal cord are where the two bones of the vertebrae meet, are the foramina, right? That's where those are the other holes that go outside that allow the nerves to pass through, to go to the arms, to go to the tissue, to sensory motor, depending on the location.
Yep.
So in those holes can also be narrower
Yeah.
due to calcium forming from arthritis, right?
Yep.
So to give an idea, so if he has any of that going on, there's three basic surgeries, and this is where I wanted to come full circle with you,
Yeah,
talk
please.
about technology. So, and my dad just had a couple of these surgeries, so it's kind of fresh in my mind, and I helped do the rehab with them, and I got to see before, after, and during. But anyways, so one of the surgeries is where they remove a piece of the bone, or remove a couple pieces, basically on that arch of the spinal cord called the lamina, okay?
Gotcha.
Or not the spinal cord, the spinal column. So
Oh,
it'd be kind of the roof or the ceiling of that spinal cord, going out to what we see on the back of our back, the little spinous processes,
mhm.
the bumps on our back. Well, the lamina is the top part of that spinal canal. So the doctors will go in there and remove either a bigger piece or break it up into a couple little pieces and remove, to get pressure off that spinal cord. So that's one surgery they can do. Another one is they can go in and kind of bore out, or open up the foramina in there,
Widen it.
widen it where the nerves exit to go to the arms, the legs, the muscles, the nerve,
Mhm.
the organs, whatever. The third one is, and a lot of times they do this with the laminectomy, is they fuse the two bones together. And so the first one is they remove bone to open up space. The second one, they kind of clean out the holes of the exiting nerve, and the
Mhm.
third one is where they put hardware in, and they connect, they put screws, plates,
Cement
or some.
sometimes.
What's that?
Cement sometimes if they remove the
Yep.
disc.
Yeah, and one of the things they do is take bone from somewhere else and use that kind of cement to kind of create new bone growth.
Yep.
And so just basically to take two vertebrae that aren't functioning very well and to fuse them to make them one big block, and then the ones above and below can move better. So that's another surgery. The fourth thing they can do, if there is some stenosis, and again, we're speculating on this, we don't know what he has, but if there's a contusion with stenosis, these are kind of surgeries they can do. The fourth thing that they can do is throw an artificial spacer or a disc, and that's kind of relatively new technology. So getting back to what I wanted to interrupt you with
Mhm.
talking about new technology, they can put these artificial discs in between the two vertebrae to create a new gap, taking pressure off that foramina. So
That's amazing.
pretty cool. And one of the things that I recently learned is that in dealing with a lot of this, those discs, that the research they're doing can last up to 70 years, those new artificial discs. So
That's
talking
awesome.
about the technology outliving some of these doctors and outliving some of these patients. I mean, you go in, he's young, but if he got one of those spacers, it's going to last him his life,
And
into his
in
90s, and he's not
comparison,
going to.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna say in comparison, not too long ago, if you had a hip replacement or a total knee replacement, there was a good chance that you were gonna have another one before your life was over.
Right.
And imagine having, a total knee replacement at 55, and they say to you, well, at 70, in 15 years, you got to have another one.
I have a patient right now dealing with that.
Bro,
She's in her,
that's aggressive.
she's turning, I think she's turning 72, and she's due for another. She had both knees done at the same time, and she has to give. That's so much harder to
I
heal.
hate that. I
Oh
mean,
my gosh, I feel
if
terrible
that's her
for her.
only option, then that's her only option, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, obviously, I don't specifically speaking with this patient aside, it just makes it so difficult to go through such an aggressive surgery when a lot of people at that age today are frail,
Mhm.
they're not as strong as they can be. My big takeaway, or one of my takeaways, is how people who are older are not as strong, but more so what throws me off is that their balance is terrible.
Yes.
It's like balance has nothing to do with, well, I mean, it has a little bit to do with strength training and stuff,
Yeah.
but you don't have to go to the gym for 90 minutes to have good balance, right?
Right.
And balance is so important. I mean, it
Yep.
is how you move around in your world. It is the difference between catching yourself or breaking a hip,
Yep.
which for some people can be the first domino to
Yeah.
ending up, in not a good
Going
place.
downhill.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's why they say most of these elderly do fracture a hip or have head trauma or whatnot is not because they're frail and weak, it's because they lose their balance.
right.
So to your point, you said there's a little to the strength, but it's more like we talked about with ankle sprains, the high ankle sprains, the low ankle sprains, is regaining that proprioception. Those little receptors in there
Yeah.
that tell your brain what position that joint is in space, right?
Hmm.
And so to kind of talk about those proprioceptors again, the what I always tell my patients is how, because they don't understand what that is, right? And I talk about like you got two blocks, right? And then you have like this little disc in there, and that disc's main job is to read information given to it. So if
Yeah.
that block leans to one side, it's sending a signal to the brain telling. So I tell them, okay, close your eyes right now and take your arm and put your hand in front of your face with your eyes closed. Do you know where your hand is, right?
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things they all know exactly where their hand is. And so that's my perfect way of showing them, okay, that's a proprioceptor at working at its finest, right? You didn't need to see your hand to know where it was. How did you know that? Oh, well, and they don't have an answer, but now they do because they know there's a receptor in their shoulder, in their elbow, in their wrist that is telling them where their joint is in space, right? So, anyways, to get back to
Yeah.
your, you know, point, that's what we need to at all ages. So like I have my 20, 30, 40s. I have one high schooler and one college rolled their ankles for the first time ever. And
Ever.
I'm like, ever. And I'm like, and they're one's a D1 athlete, one's probably gonna continue to go on. Who knows what he wants to do, but could go, play at the next level. And I'm like, dude, I do not want this to be a death wish for you. I don't care what I'm not letting you not succeed at this ankle rehab because he's all, but I don't have any pain. I said, okay, let's do a
Yeah.
couple. And I did some challenges on him and he has no balance, but no pain. He feels like he can play. And that's why most people have repetitive, ankle injuries because the pain relatively goes away. But what happens is after the swelling goes down, those proprioceptors, and all this, is that they change their message to the brain and they
Yeah.
become a new normal.
Yeah.
That blocked ankle becomes normal. So now any deviation from that, the brain freaks out and the ankle rolls again.
Yeah.
So you have to reset those receptors as soon as possible. But to your point, we have to do it when we're healthy, not when we need to do it. So we should
Yeah.
be working on balance and crawling, in my opinion, all the time.
Yeah.
Everybody should work on balance, crawling, and rolling around like babies all the time. I
Yeah.
mean, so
Yeah, so the crawling and rolling around, some people might be like, well, I get the balance portion, but explain it. I assume, it just puts you in a load bearing
yeah,
situation and putting you through movements. I
yeah,
always say that we typically are standing, sitting, laying
yeah,
down, standing, sitting, laying down.
yeah,
And that's it. Whereas, if you spent a summer on the farm with me or something, they wouldn't be standing, sitting, laying down. It would
right,
be a lot of other stuff in between, a lot of other moments. So we become very static. I was asking somebody about balance. Um, and basically the question was, when do you think that loss of balance happened? I treat someone, make a long story short, I treat this gentleman and he has two older sons and he has two younger children. And I treat one of his older sons on the regular. And we were talking about his father who's going through some balance issues. And he said, man, I feel like my balance isn't that good. And so we were just saying, like, when was that? Last year, 5 years ago? And I have this little trampoline. I said, those little rebound trampolines that are like 4 inches off
Mhm.
the ground. I said, can you jump off that trampoline and catch yourself? And he was like, yeah, I could jump off your adjusting table and catch myself. And I said, well, it's not a contest, but
Yeah.
I could do it
Start.
higher. No, I'm just kidding. I said, but do you think if your dad jumped off that trampoline right now, how? And he's like, yeah, I think he could do it, but he might stumble a couple. He's not landing it clean. I wouldn't give him a perfect 10, is what he said. And I said, well, when do you think that happened? You think at 45 he could have done it? Yeah, at 55, I think so. At 60, probably 65. I don't know. He's 70 now. So it's okay, somewhere between 60 and 70. Now, do you think if he would have just simply jumped off a trampoline 10 times a day since he was 60, he'd still be able to do it? And he said, yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's like we just don't do those things that we need to do later. So reverse engineering, I want to make sure that my balance is always sharp, not only so I can cross over my cousin and hit a jump shot, but so I can catch myself if I stumble on a curb, so I can do these things that are important. I don't want that first domino to tip. So the balance is a big thing, and I think it's such an easy thing to continue to improve, right? Like it doesn't have to
100.
be something that your balance is what it is, and then it just gets worse as you age. you know it's
Right.
all a practice thing. And so as I'm recognizing these things, I'm trying to help my patients and my athletes recognize that. And then the big takeaway on what you said is lack of pain doesn't necessarily mean 100% function. Those two things correlate a lot in athletes' minds. It doesn't hurt, I must be good. That ain't it.
Mhm.
That's not the deal. That's not it's, you can not have the pain or get rid of the pain, but still have such a lack of function, or
Mhm.
maybe you have full range of motion, but that doesn't mean that it's 100% yet, to your point. So it's not just a young athlete or a, weekend warrior. Like I'm still, honing and pounding that message home to the elite level athlete, because they always want to go.
Right.
And I had a situation this season where somebody's like, it doesn't hurt. And then they re-injured it. Right. And so that's a little bit, it's a little frustrating sometimes,
Yeah.
but I think it's just our nature as humans is to equate, if you don't hurt, then you must be okay. And it's the same in sickness and wellness, right? We've had the example of a lot of things, we could go into it, but just because you don't feel sick, it doesn't mean that you're well. And there's a
Right.
lot of people who don't have a fever that are walking around unhealthy. That's it. And so
Yep.
those two things don't correlate. And I think, to your point, that's important to recognize. And it should be a motivator to continue to rehab and continue to hopefully make improvements, even once the pain is gone from an injury, whether you're a pro
Right.
athlete or not.
Correct. Yep, I agree 100%. And that's kind of from a sports medicine standpoint, one of the biggest challenges I have in practice, talking
Mhm.
to our, future chiropractors that might be listening, or
Sure.
future PTs, when you're in sports medicine, and I touched upon this earlier, we're in a very, very pain management situation many times, right?
Right.
And so having to bring it full circle and remind our athletes that, hey, just because you're, out of pain, we still have work to do, right? So, and being in a facility, being a team doc on site is making it very more difficult to be able to follow up with care versus somebody, a team person, doc, offsite like yourself. You're going to have more liberty to have those conversations, to follow up care when they're not just in pain. So,
Yeah,
we've
there's
talked about the differences, pros and cons, right?
pros and cons. Yeah. Yeah, it's there is a difference. There's advantages to both for sure. But yeah, we'll keep hammering the point home. I think it's what makes you, a unique and great doctor, Dustin, is that taking the time to explain things, I think, is great. But understanding and taking the extra step with clients, whoever they are, is important. And not everybody does that. I had a new patient come in who said, I said, do you have time? She's like, I only had 30 minutes on the meter. I need to maybe put some more money in. And I said, oh, it's been, 25 minutes. We'll pick up this conversation next time. And her statement was that her old chiropractor spent 3 minutes with her and then was done. And I said, well, everyone has a different way of doing things. Some
Mhm.
chiropractors, you come in, that once they get to know you, perhaps you're coming in, you're getting an adjustment and you're going out, and that's it. And I think that that does do a big chunk of it. I said my
Mhm.
practice is more, uh, people are a little more active, maybe because we're in San Diego, or maybe I have a younger demographic, uh, majority percentage wise, perhaps. But we take a little more time. We do some soft tissue, maybe explain some stuff, maybe give you some things to do while you're in the office, or sometimes we just talk about what your life stress is, what you eat, what your activity level is. And so spending that extra few minutes, I think, allows you the opportunity to get to know a patient, uh, other than what their symptoms are. I think
Right.
ultimately, due to a lot of factors in healthcare, things are very quick, and the turnover, in patient to patient to patient is high. And so you really focus your conversation in what is wrong and what's hurting, and let's attack that. And so I feel lucky to be able to take a little more time and to be able to, hopefully do what you do as well, which is, uh, take just a level deeper and try to, um, figure things out on on another level, maybe, is a way of putting it.
Yeah, no, that's one of the things I pride myself in our education at Palmer, chiropractic is the diagnostic part, right? We were taught very well the diagnostic side of things and the differential diagnostic part of it, right? How to go through those layers and kind of weed out things. And that's what one of the things I always talk to my patients, there's roughly 300 bones, there's roughly 600 muscles, right? Give or take.
Sure.
I'm not going to get into the nuances of it with them, but
Yeah.
I tell them 300, 600, those muscles move those bones. Okay. My job is to check the mobility, the alignment, how much the pain and inflammation is affecting it, and then look at the stability around all those joints, right? And then what we do is we map out, rule in and rule out things. So we might get through a whole exam and nothing's reproducing their issues, right?
Sure.
And I'm like, that's awesome. I just ruled out
A bunch of
10
stuff.
different things.
Yeah.
So it's not for not. Like a lot of times they'll be so disappointed. I promise I'm hurting. I'm like, there's no doubt you are.
Hmm.
But those muscles are not what's causing it. And we were able to put those in this box. Now let's figure out what else. By the time we get to the orthopedic side, and I've done my thorough exam questioning, that tells me 89% what's going on anyways. I already have an idea just based on your history, what's
Yeah.
going on. I use the orthopedic test to confirm what
Perfect.
my thinking is or to discount that and move on to something else.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I go into it thinking one thing and the tests show me something different. And I'm like, this is great, And I had a patient the other day, she's all, can I tell you what I think it is? I'm like, nope, right off the bat. She's all, but I know. And she's a yoga teacher. And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
nope, you can't tell me. I said, you could write it down if you want, and then we can compare notes after. And
Sure.
it was funny. We get done, and a lot of stuff was resonating with her. And we get up to the front, and she's all, I never got to tell you what I thought it was. And I didn't go through everything. I told her the muscles I thought it was, but then I
Mm.
wrote something else. And then she's all, I think it's my T4 and my T6 vertebrae. And I turned the paper and I had T4 and T7. I'm like, I said, that's awesome. Isn't that fun? It's like we're on the same page, so,
Yeah.
but it was funny. It's like, anyways, it's going through and checking in and out those things and coming to a differential and then going
Yeah.
from there, and you come up with your best plan, but don't hesitate to veer off and go to plan B, C, or D, depending on what we say. I always tell my patients, it's like, especially that understand football, it's like, okay, we're going into it with a game plan. Okay, I'm coach,
Mm.
you're the player. Okay, I've given you my game plan, you have to go execute what you need to do all week, right?
Yeah.
Now then we're going to come back, and if at halftime, if the game plan is not working, then we're going to reassess and come up with a new game plan. Does that sound fair? Of course, right? And so that way we're not stuck in this um, um, cookie cutter approach, right?
No, I
So
think you can't have that,
right.
especially you can maybe have that with, majority of people perhaps, but you got to specifically look at an athlete if they are at a high school, college, or pro level, you know, positionally what they're doing, and all these factors, and specifically to that person versus, like you said, a cookie cutter approach of let me do the three natural tests and most likely is this. I don't like most likely.
Yeah.
Like most likely is that's not good.
Yeah.
I want to go with certainties and free throw slam dunk percentage, certainty. So yeah, I kind of try to approach things the same way. And then also sometimes, like you said, not having something turn up as a positive is a positive in the sense that it rules out something serious. And look, I oftentimes I'm like, okay, I know it's not this. So now today we're going to go 100% because at worst you're going to be a little sore tomorrow. And at best we're going to accelerate this sucker and get this better,
Correct.
but you can't do that unless you know that it's safe to do that. Right.
Yep.
So,
Good.
I want to touch on a couple things before we wrap up. I know it's getting close to that kind of red zone timeline for us, but
Yeah.
last week I spoke on, we touched on mental health last week. And I said I was going to do a little research during the week about some resources that are out there, just specifically for some certain things. But in general, I just wanted to spend a little time. And what I found out is that there are online options and apps out there for all sorts of conditions, dang near everything, so I wanted to just read off a couple that I looked up. If somebody's looking for therapy, there's betterhelp.com, and that's an online app that you can download and get in touch with a therapist. There's another app that's more behavioral type of thing, and that's called Mood Fit, which was another unique one. There's if it's stress related like anxiety, one that's more specifically tailored to that is Calm. So that Calm has an app. You probably heard of them as well. For meditation, there's I'm trying to think of what the name of that one now is. Calm was for meditation. For stress relief, it was actually an app called Sanvello, Sanvello, and that was for stress relief primarily. And they have a website with a bunch of resources there as well. But I know you're going to the fundraiser tomorrow, correct?
Yes, correct.
So obviously you're excited about that. You want to talk a little bit more about that? I know you mentioned it last week that it was raising money and you guys were having a dinner, a gala. What was it specifically?
Yeah, dinner gala. It's being hosted by Carrie Ann Nava from Dancing with the Stars. There's going to be a couple guest speakers. One of them is Jim Quick, who's a brain guy, which I'm really excited to hear. And I can't remember. I think Dave Asprey too is going to be one of the speakers. So anyways, there's going to be a number of speakers, but it's basically to raise money for the foundation to help those in need that might not have the means to get scans for mental health.
That's
they're
awesome.
really trying to make it mental health versus what did we talk about before? Make it a positive thing, not a
it doesn't have to be a negative stigma or a connotation.
Right. Yeah. So basically helping people with all kinds of things that might, for whatever reasons they can't afford or, whatever. There's a lot of people out there that have been helped by the Amen clinics and have asked to be able to donate a scan but the clinics have never really had a platform to do that. So they weren't able to fully do that. So they put that together, this foundation charitable event to make it accessible and give it a means to do that. So we're hoping for a lot of good outcome and hopefully raise a lot of money for this. So
man, well, if you
but
have
I'll
a
let you
link or
know.
something, if you have a link or anything like that, let me know. I'd be more than happy to share it. I'd
Okay.
be happy to donate it a little
Yeah.
bit towards it. Every little bit helps. And I think if you can, provide a scan which leads to some information which can help somebody who previously didn't have that information make better life choices or know how to proceed to improve their mental health, what a better gift, than that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, unfortunately, especially in Southern California, and I'm sure it's everywhere, but we're privy to it in LA, even Anaheim, Long Beach, San Diego. When I come to your clinic, I mean,
Yeah.
the homeless population is, it's terrible to walk down the street and see that, and there's a lot of different reasons for it, but a big one is because of people's mental health, regardless if that's an underlying cause or self-inflicted through drugs or alcohol, but there's usually, some other means. Why do people start that in the first place? They're usually trying to escape, right?
Yeah.
So if we can catch these things early on before people try, you know, or feel the need, how cool, I
No, it's
just,
helpful. It's
yeah.
impactful. It's life changing.
Yeah, I'll definitely send you a link tonight. There is a, and I wish this is going to air afterwards, but people can still donate. But there's going to be a live link to the event. Not that
Gotcha.
you necessarily have to watch live, but it's a minimal donation to get access to that.
Yeah.
So if people did want to help support at a a rate that they can afford and want to do, then that's another option. So.
No, I think there's a lot of good options out there during the holidays. People are always trying to be charitable. And I think that's wonderful. Literally today, I was driving to work at a stoplight, and there was, just a bunch of tents on the side of the road. And we spoke on this before. It's distressing to say the least. I empathize, and like I just don't feel good about that. I
Yeah.
feel like it's 2022. I wish there was a better way of dealing with that problem other than to ignore it. But
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're going to the event tomorrow. I think that'll be cool. I'd love to maybe come one of these times next year or something at the second annual
Yeah.
one, or something in the future. I'd like to have a scan done on myself. I think we talked about how I've had 8 or 9 concussions, and it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to see if I had a scan, they said everything is normal, I better find a different excuse.
Yeah. Right.
I've been using that as a crutch for a minute. Well, hey, back in the day. So,
Yeah.
um,
Well,
no,
yeah.
I think it's a great preventative thing too, because no matter where you're at, you can always make improvement. And I was making that statement for a whole separate issue with the patient today. And, it's, we all get caught in this, want it right now, and that's, I think, a little bit indicative of the society we live in, where it's instant gratification type of situation. And shit, some things take time, that you're not going to. I was telling a patient today, it took you 9 months to make that little human that you brought in here. Why do you think your body's going to be great, you know, 8 weeks after delivery
Yeah.
of that human,
Yeah.
like literally, right? And with
Yes.
somebody else today, I was saying, talking about maintenance, you brought up the point, he has a Lamborghini truck. And I said, dude, how long have you had that? Like a year and a half? And he's like, what are you saying? It's old. I need to get a new one. I said, yeah, it's old. You should get a new one. Maybe donate that to me,
Yeah.
I'll use it. No, but I said, I'm sure you've taken that in, right? Because he's East Coast, West Coast, and I don't know if he keeps the car here or goes back and forth.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, I've got it tuned up, and there's a car guy here in San Diego that treats a lot, not treats, but is a lot of clients go to him, and
Detail. Yeah.
yeah, and so said, yeah, of course, I get it tuned up, I get it, oil change, the whole nine, and so yeah, I saw the new rims, I saw that, you're always getting it shined up, but if you didn't do that, you think your Lambo truck would last as long? And he shook his head. He's like, Doc, you're funny. He's like, you're always like trying to, he's like, I get what you're saying. Like, and
Let's go.
but
Yeah.
yeah, my point is, shit, you maintain your expensive car, like do things to maintain your body too, and if you're gonna tune up your car before the engine blows, then why don't you do little maintenance on your body and do things that are preventative as well, getting to the point of don't wait till it hurts to do something. And even if you're not hurting, you could see somebody like yourself and get an assessment and be told where you have a weakness that actually isn't causing you pain yet, and address that before it causes you pain or before it leads to an injury. And to be quite honest, addressing it now is going to be way quicker, a shorter fix, a quicker timeline to healing and correction than post fact, right? So
Correct.
I think they both got it. And it's a day in the life. I think there's a camera following us around. We talk about 20 different things with 25 different patients. So
Yeah.
I came home today. Sometimes my wife asks me, like, how was the day, like, what'd you do? And I'm just so present focused that I got to like pause and think about the different cases if there's something interesting to discuss.
Right.
Normally I save those for you. It's not, it's
Yeah.
a little bit repetitive, and it's like, I appreciate you asking, but I think I'm probably boring you with the
Yeah.
details. So.
I get it.
Yeah. Anyhow, well, man, I know you got other things to do, and you have a function tomorrow. It's going to be a late night, but I do have to ask you one thing before you go, and it's the last thing. Did you think about the habit challenge that I proposed to you last week?
Yeah, no, I did.
Oh, you did? I thought by the
Yeah.
look of your face, you were going to be like, I didn't do it.
No, I was waiting for it. I thought we were getting away. No. There's a couple things in business that I want to work on for my next you know, the next year. Um, s- I had an opportunity to do this kind of planning thing last week. John Maxwell, I don't know if you ever listened to him. I'm going to send you this. It was a great 33-minute little podcast he did, but it talked about planning, not for your life, but planning for, business. And so anyways, there's a couple little things that were recommended to do on a daily basis that it resonated with me, and I liked. Um, I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but it kind of took the idea of reflecting on things, reflecting on your day, and um, breaking it up into little chunks versus big things, right? And to kind of summarize the day. So one of the things I wanted to work on, not necessarily journaling,
Mhm.
which I've done in the past and I enjoy doing, which are reflections of your day and what you learn. This is more summarize the day, right? So it was a little different approach to it, which I'm like, okay, because sometimes when I'm journaling or meditating, it just feels repetitive, right? It's like the same thing, especially
Sure.
I got up, went to work,
Yeah.
but this was just summarize your day. So I kind of like that. And I'm going to try that. Again, not try, I'm going to do it and see how it works for me, where it could be bullet points, it could be, and then at the end of the week, there's little things you're supposed to do with it. But I'm hoping it gives me, my reflection will give me more. Basically the take home was you will spend time on things you value. So the important things. So I want to make sure I'm focusing my attention on the right things.
Mhm.
So be more
Intentional.
yeah, intentional with things. So anyways, so that's what I'm going to be planning on working on. Long
Okay.
story. Yeah.
So once a day, you're going to be physically like writing something down, or just like
Yeah.
taking a pause and thinking about
No,
it.
it's going to be a physical thing for me. There's a calendar that's part of it.
Nice.
Calendar and a legal pad, and then you transfer like the things you do on the legal pad to the calendar. And then, but for me, I'm very tactile. Like I like taking notes. I like, writing things down. Yeah, exactly. And I think that comes with the profession, right? Tactile. So for me, I like the idea of the calendar. I like the idea of transferring. I like summarizing notes. So anyway, so that's what I'm going to work on, and I want to make that a habit because I've dabbled in that kind of stuff in the past, but never made it a habit. And I think your challenge will be a good catalyst for me to stay that way.
Nice. Well, I'll ask you next week if you were 7 for 7 or 5 for 7 or whatever your metric is, and yeah, I'll keep on you about that, because I think,
Yeah.
if you're intentional, just like in sports, we could have huddled up and said, okay, 1, 2, 3 break, and
Yep.
everyone do what they want. I'm sure I could have scrambled, you would have blocked, I would have found somebody open, and we could have freestyled it. But what do
Yep.
we normally do? We were intentional. We had a play, we had an A, B, and C, and that's what we did. And then if we needed to freestyle, that was D, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you freestyle your day, you can get through your day, but it also feels very chaotic,
Mhm.
And I like to, the night before, have a list. I varied it through my time. Sometimes I've had a top three where it's like I need to get, these are the top three most important things I need to do the next day. And I have to get one of those three done.
Mhm.
I'm trying to go 3 for 3, but I must have one of those done. And I always try to put on something that's annoying that I don't really want to do, but I know I got to get it done. So that's one of the ways. And then sometimes I just make a list of everything that has to be done.
Mm.
And I know I got to try to check mark as many as I can. And the ones I don't get pushed to the next day or a week or a month. Just, completing a thought that I want to do something every day, like you said, and I'm just trying to add a little micro habit. And so I couldn't decide between 3 things that I really want to do every day. And so I decided, instead of trying to enact 3 different habits all at once, I'm just going to do something every day, whether it's one of those 3 things, right? And so that's to take a walk around my neighborhood. It's about a 2 mile up and down loop, for several reasons, just for fresh air, just to kind of burn some stress, maybe after a meal, take a walk. So take a walk, 50 air squats, or sauna. So we have a sauna at the house. I bought at the beginning of COVID, and I haven't
Good.
used it as frequently as I'd like to use it. And I had the thought the other day, if I did nothing else but I just saunaed 3 times a week for the next year, would I be healthier, or would I be more or less healthy a year from now? I mean,
You have
point blank,
nothing to
I'd be
lose,
more healthy.
everything to gain. That's your
Right.
PMF right there, bro.
Million
That
percent. Yeah.
right? I would,
So
yeah.
that's it. So every day, I'm trying to go 7 for 7. If I'm not home and I can't walk around my neighborhood, I can still take a walk. If I'm not here and I can't use the sauna, I can always do 50 air squats, which I'm trying to go all the way down, all the way up. I had knee surgery a few years ago. And so maintaining my knee, ankle, and hip flexibility is important. And I don't always move through my full range of motion. And so that's it. I'm doing one of those 3 things every day. And yeah, we'll continue that. And I think I'll be better off this time next year for it if I'm not a dork and don't stay committed to it. So
Right.
normally if I write it down or I make it a point, I follow through on most of those things. And if I don't, then uh, you know then I guess it is what it is. But it's not just one thing. I normally have several things I'm trying to do. So I complete 3 out of 5, I'm still better off than if I hadn't attempted. So that's
Correct.
kind of the mindset. And yeah, I like the intentional thought on your part. um I'd like to see how that feels after a week, so we'll talk about it in a week or two and see how you're doing.
Sounds good. Same
Yeah, my
here.
brother. Well, I know it's you know we're 3 weeks from the holidays and we're in December, and it's going to go by quickly. We're in week 14 of the NFL season, I should say episode 14 of our podcast. And I really like what we're doing here. I know we've been kind of freestyling and modifying it. I appreciate our conversations. We could probably talk on the daily like this, but I look forward to the next time we speak next week. This episode will drop on Thursday. And as always, we appreciate you guys who are listening. I hope you learned something. We're trying to teach you guys. If you want to watch us, you can watch us on YouTube. You can listen to us or find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And as always, be healthy, stay safe, and we'll be back next Thursday. So good night, everybody. We'll catch you soon. Dustin, have a great time tomorrow.
Thank you, buddy. I'll let you know, and you have a good rest of the night and tomorrow as well.
Yeah, bro. We'll talk to you soon. Okay. Have a good
All right,
week.
sounds good. Thank you, buddy.
Bye.
You too. See ya.
Good night.